This was back in 2002, right? There was no YouTube, there was none of these things. So this makes no sense to me. We are walking for 3 hours, and we were 100% sure we were lost. And believe me, this was the crossroads. And and my life changed. And I quickly ran out because if someone's shouting your name in the mountains, it's almost always never good. There were about 17 Sherpa guides who got crushed to their death. It was a 7.9 magnitude earthquake, one of the largest to hit Nepal in a century. And we were in middle of this earthquake. Nature always is going to have the last word. And in that moment, I didn't think that I was going to die. I was actually very certain that I was going to die.
Hey everyone, welcome to Purpose Driven Superhumans. I'm your host Raj. This podcast is all about spotlighting people who are living with purpose. If you're into bold stories, deep purpose, and unapologetic growth, you are in the right place. We have with us today the first vegan who has summited Mount Everest twice. Welcome, Kuntal. How's it going?
Yeah, all good, all good. Happy to be here and happy to be here sharing my story and my journey. So, yeah.
How do you define living your purpose, and how has your adventure helped you connect with that definition?
Right. So I think for this, I have to share a little bit of story of my formative years. And to be very honest, earlier on in my life, as I kind of, was in my school days or in my college days, or eventually even in my university days in the US, to be very honest, I never had a purpose in my life. I was just this happy-go-lucky guy who was honestly filled with tons of apathy about most issues surrounding me or even kind of bothering me in some facets. I just thought, why unnecessarily make our life difficult or make our life complex or take on these challenges or make our life uncomfortable. I was like, chill, yaar. Life is good. My parents have made all this money. They are giving me, this great life. Why do I need to change anything? Let's just chill, let's just fun. So all my friends always thought of me as this happy-go-lucky guy who is just going to follow what we do. And to be very frank, that is what I did. And I coasted through my school. I coasted through my junior college, through my, engineering days. All of this was, nice and steady, no issues whatsoever. So I had gone to do my master's degree in the US, and I was there living independently with two of my friends. And, I was living independently. I was making my own money. I was making decisions on my own about what to do with that money and those things. And again, life was very good. I was generally very enjoying, this freedom and everything. But then one of the days we went grocery shopping, three of us, and I started buying things. And I picked up, a pastry, and I picked up a Snickers bar, and I picked up like a leather belt, and I picked up a whole host of these things. And my roommate was, you read ingredients of what is in this? This is 2002, okay? And he's talking about reading ingredients. And he's like, have you even read what is in your Snickers bar? What is in that pastry you have bought? So I'm like, no, why? What does it matter? And he's like, there are eggs in them. And then he asked me that you don't eat eggs, right? I'm like, I really don't care. As long as I don't see them, doesn't matter to me. I don't see eggs, it's nice, packaged chocolate bar. Why should I really care about this? And then he said, what about the leather belt? You should know where the leather belt is coming from. No, I'm like, I don't know. It's nicely sitting on, here, in packaged, properly on this, shelf. It looks great on me. I'm going to buy. I never, was able to spend money this way. This is my money. I'm going to make my decisions. And I think the conversation ended there. But as we made two, three, four more of such trips together, because we were roommates, so we would all do these things together, he kept asking some of these questions, but never really telling me, what was going on because I had never asked him. The thing was always, hey, I'm okay. I'm, just going to do this. But after third or fourth time, I was like, why are you telling me these things? What is the problem? Tell me what is the problem with, tell me what is the problem with leather. And he said, okay. He sent me some videos. These are videos of undercover investigations into the world of eggs and the world of leather. And I started deep diving into some of these things. So I started first with eggs and I started understanding the whole industry and the whole life cycle and how it impacts an animal. As generally someone who was never questioning, I never questioned it. Okay, this is who we are, and this is what I'm going to do. And I never ate meat or never ate eggs or never did anything where I thought at least we are harming animals. Okay, so that's also what my attitude was there. And then I realized that hey, whatever I'm eating has eggs in them, and this is what the egg industry looks like. It is kind of full of cruelty and all of these things that are wrong with it. And then I looked at leather industry, and I realized leather is literally the skin of an animal, and no animal is going to offer its own skin for us to wear it, flaunt around. So the animal of course has to be killed. And I looked at the whole cycle. This also led me to look up, because these pages are made very smartly. Okay, so this one page linked me to the other page, which was about dairy industry, and I thought, how can dairy be cruel? This makes no sense to me. So I clicked, I read through the whole life cycle, I saw all the videos. Now you may think this is so simple, these are just food choices. How can it make such a big impact on your life? But for me, it was like genuinely earth shattering. So the moment I knew about these things, there is no way to unknow it. There is no way to unsee any of this. I had to, kind of make a decision, or I had to actually make a choice. And the choice was between absolute apathy, ignorance is bliss, or to actually take a stand for something in life for the first time. Because all these years I thought, I can't be uncomfortable. I don't want to be uncomfortable. Can I still continue living this lifestyle while knowing what the truth is, or do I really want to make a change? I decided that I am going to make a change, and that I am going to stand up for this specific purpose that I really think I believe in. And this is the very first time in my life that I actually had a purpose, or I had something that I believed in. What that did is that it opened floodgates of change in me. So there was very clear thought process that what is on my plate and what goes on my body. These are two things totally in under my control, and I can most definitely change this. This single decision allowed me to do was it allowed me to look inward and go on a much different journey. And that journey was where I started looking inward, and I started looking for all of these uncomfortable things that I had avoided for all this point in my life. That I really had to work on addressing some of these things. This first purpose led me on a journey inward that allowed me to kind of grow as a human, grow as a person. I feel become a better person. It took a journey to go on, and I was definitely able to overcome and grow beyond these things, become a better human, and continue becoming a better human. Veganism allowed me to essentially, because it is my first purpose of life, and it allowed me to see the oppression that we as humans do against other species. And then as I looked inward, it allowed me to see oppression that we do even towards each other in wide variety of forms. It's been a 23-year long journey. I'm not going to say I'm perfect, far from perfect. But at least this purpose, this start allowed me to look inward and start working on myself, start becoming a better person. So that's how the journey started. Adventure was not even part of this journey. I went on for almost 8 years without even adventure coming into this journey from any angle. And then at some point, I moved back. I was living in the United States, working in the US, and then I moved back to Mumbai, where I live today. It was mainly to take care of my father, who was unfortunately diagnosed with a disease called Lewy body dementia, LBD. He had lost a lot of his independence, and my mother was his primary caregiver. So I thought that I wanted to come back home and, just take care of him. Life moved forward. I got married. Things were good. And then my wife and I thought that, hey, we want to go on a vacation. And little did I know that that vacation is going to be the second crossroads of my life. So we decided we'll go for a vacation. And so wife is like, okay, where should we go? So I'm like, you tell me. And so she's like, I've never seen snow in my life. I'm like, great, let's go see some snow. So this was February of 2009. Dipti, my wife, and I, we decided that we'll go to Shimla. It's in the dead of winter. We'll definitely see some snow. So we go there, and for the first 6 days, this trip I cannot forget. This was the life changer for me. So I remember being that tourist who would, daily complain, मेरे room में पानी नहीं आ रहा है, गर्म पानी नहीं आ रहा है, आप लोग ने heater है, freezing our asses in this room. We have to like be completely in, two blankets all the time. We can't even go out. What a mess this is. And then come to think, few years later, sitting at 26,000 feet, freezing in like this 40 degrees Celsius and not complaining, actually being happy. I'm like, wow, what a, drastic change in my life. So anyway, we were there for the first 6 days, and us, Maruti Zen hai, and I have chains, and I know this location where currently there is a lot of snow because I've gotten a local who has said take our money, take us there, really want to see some snow. So from Shimla, we drive on the old Hindustan-Tibet highway all the way to this place in Narkanda. Like it was about 80 kilometers, so it took us about 2.5, 3 hours. And we saw some amazing snow peaks on the drive and everything. We reached Narkanda, and our driver was like, look at these amazing, gigantic, snow mountains. They are so amazing. So we look at these mountains and we are like, no, we don't want to, we can see this in YouTube. You told us that you're going to make us touch snow. We want to touch snow. This is not what we signed up for or gave you the money. He was basically trying to, take us back for them because back from there because he didn't want to actually drive up where there was real snow. So he's like, okay, okay, let's go. So we started our drive, 8 kilometer drive towards this place called Hatu Peak. And on top of the peak, there is this Hatu Mata temple. And about half 1 kilometer into the drive, his Zen got stuck in like almost a feet and half of snow. I was wearing this, t-shirt and like a jeans and slippers. And I told Dipti, hey, we are really enjoying here. Let's go like another 15 minutes forward and we can just walk and we'll see what other views we can find. We'll, have some fun and we'll come back. And so both Dipti and I walked for the next 15 minutes. And back then I was about 105 kilos or something. And so we walked for 15 minutes and then we thought, yeah, we are having a lot of fun. And that 15 minutes became 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours. And now we were so stuck. We were like, we are walking for 3 hours and we were 100% sure we were lost and I have no clue where we are and we were panicking and it was so much panic that I had actually started wheezing almost like an asthma attack and we were in like genuine trouble. I feel I was for a moment thought we were going to require some rescue or something. And out of nowhere this massive Tibetan bhotia dog comes, and believe me, there are lakhs of these dog stories in the Himalayan mountains. I have no idea. We were shocked when we came back and we heard that these dogs appear and then they take you to the top. And I'm like, what? We were completely, first of all, we were scared, and then the dog came and then he would, just guide us, walk in front of us. After 10 minutes, he became so friendly. He would go below our, behind our legs and under our legs. And, he would like just be so friendly with us. And I'm like, wow. And he led us to the top. And we got to the top of Hatu Peak. There is not a single soul in miles and miles anywhere. It's Dipti, me, and the dog, three of us sitting near each other and just staring into infinity. And believe me, this was the crossroads. And my life changed. I just fell in love with what had happened at that point. The insane level of happiness or peace or feeling alive. You may think all of these is so cliched things that people go through, but yes, all of these things were happening. But in that moment, all that constant planning for the future, all that pondering mistakes in past, everything had melted away. And the present moment was in constant extreme focus, and I was able to exist in that present moment. And that is what I fell in love with. Yes, I fell in love with mountains. I fell in love with, nature. I fell in love with outdoors. All of those things happened. I fell in love with, how happy I was. But what I truly fell in love was with this state of mind that I was able to achieve on the top of this mountain. Of course, all good things have to end. So we decided our driver must be really, like gone bonkers. We have been away for 4 hours. It's going to be still another 2, 3 hours to get down. I hope he has not police or someone or some, people are already looking for us. I hope any of these things are not happening. The dog came all the way down with us. And of course, our driver was absolutely livid beyond imagination. He was almost about to, get together a rescue and everything. Luckily, we were back before that. We got back and that dog wanted some food to eat, and all we had was a packet of pani puri khakra, and he totally lapped up the whole packet of pani puri khakra. I came back home and I thought I would really love to feel like this again, like how I felt on top of this mountain. I would like to feel like that more often, or I would like to feel like that a lot more. So I thought, I'm building out this technology company and I'm so passionate about it. And, this is all some amazing work I'm doing. Shouldn't I feel that way when I'm building out these things? And I thought, let's try. And for the next 2, 3 months, I tried. But honestly, I never felt that spark for my work. And I said, maybe I should go back to the mountains. Who knows? And so I signed up myself for a trip and I went back to the mountains. And believe me, sheerly, I didn't have to reach the top. Just the fact that I was in the mountains, in the outdoors, and I was just hiking made me feel like that already. So I was like, maybe it's the mountains. Maybe, it's this act of me going and challenging myself, or I don't know, maybe it's just that I'm out in the nature and I feel like this. And I said, wow. So I continued going to the mountains. Of course, it's not like I could like take off from work for 2 weeks and go back. It was, mostly a lot of weekend trips that I was doing in the mountains and I was just loving it. Life, kept going further until October 2010 when I decided that I wanted to see the tallest mountain of the world, Everest. As a kid, I had seen many documentaries of Everest. And 97, back then we had DD Metro. And DD Metro had shown this PBS Nova documentary, Nova Everest. And I remember seeing that documentary and I remember seeing outstanding faces of that mountain and some history about the mountain of how Sherpa Tenzing and Sir Edmund Hillary had climbed it and all of those amazing things. So it's not that I decided back as a kid I'm going to climb Everest. I was an unfit kid, as I said, who didn't want to do anything uncomfortable in life. Okay, so Everest was fascinating. I think some of the seeds got sown in back, wanting to see Everest, or at least the seeds that Everest is there in mind. Sometimes you think that, you see some things and they don't make an impact on you. I think our mind works in crazy ways, so don't discount anything. 13, 14 years later, and I'm like, I want to see Everest. Those pictures are distinctly in my mind. I want to see this mountain. And so I signed up for a trip to hike to Everest Base Camp. Now I was the director of India operations of a big company and I was making money. I could take time off for 2 weeks and it was not a problem anymore. So I went, landed in Kathmandu. We took a short flight to this place called Lukla, which is the gateway to Mount Everest. And for the next 8, 10 days, we walked through some of the most spectacular scenery that exists on this planet. And then we reached Everest Base Camp. And the moment we reached Everest Base Camp, I'm like, where is Everest? And our guide said that you can't see Everest from Everest Base Camp. And I'm like, what? I make all like 6 months of training, all this money spent and walking, and now I can't see Everest. So he's like, don't worry. We have set up like a nice detour to this place called Pumori Base Camp, and you're going to be stationed there for 2 nights. And it's going to give you the best vantage point of Everest anywhere on this planet. So you'll get to see so much Everest that you'll get bored of Everest after living there for 2 days. So through the evening, we hiked and we reached Pumori Base Camp at about 5:30 in the evening. And we were like super tired because we had started like hiking at around 4 in the morning and this was 5:30 in the evening now. So many detours and many difficult hikes later, we had reached Pumori Base Camp. And so all of us crashed inside the dining tent. We were all very hungry. So we were all exchanging photos and eating some food and chit-chatting. And there's this chef guide outside who started shouting my name. Kuntal sir. And I quickly ran out because if someone's shouting your name in the mountains, it's almost always never good. And so I was like, what's happening? And so he's like, I went outside and I'm like, what's happening? And he's like, sir, turn around and look at Everest. And so I turned around and I looked at Everest and a sunset was happening. So the last rays of sunset were directly falling on Everest. Everest is this massive range, okay? On the left of Everest, we have Lola, we have Khumbuntse, and we have many other mountains. And on the right of Everest, we have Lhotse, Nuptse. And Nuptse is so towering and so beautiful. These all gigantic peaks that just engulf Everest. And almost makes you wonder for a moment, is Everest truly the tallest peak in the world? Because all of these look much bigger than Everest. But when the sunset happens, every other peak becomes, gray and black in color. In the middle, you have Everest, which is burning golden in color. The last rays of sunset truly fall on Everest. And when I saw Everest this way, I honestly fell in love. I fell in love. And in that moment, I promised myself that mountain willing, one day I will come back, I will be on the top. And that's, where my life changed again. Because I decided that I wanted to climb Everest and that this is my Everest of life. And I came back home and I kind of announced to everyone that, hey, I'm going to climb Everest. And one of the first kind of reactions from everyone was that you're gone mad. Like in, like how they tell people in Gujarati, they pagal the gyo se tu. So everyone told me, that you have gone completely mad. But honestly, to me, I had found my Everest. And yes, it's not like that I didn't have an Everest in my life at that point. Veganism was a big Everest and will always be the biggest Everest of my life, standing up for, these animals. But I found my next Everest, which was climbing to the top of the literal Everest. And when I found this Everest, it gave me the focus, the relentless drive to go on this journey to pursue it. That's what it gave me. And that's where this, journey started. And that's where, adventure came in. And of course, the journey later where I started training and all of those things. But I also quickly realized very early on, the moment I had announced that I am going to do Everest and as a vegan, there was a lot of pushback around this in the sense that, hey, no vegan has done climbed Everest ever till now. And how are you going to climb it? You are going to require eating meat, eating eggs, drinking all this amount of dairy so that you can, get all your micronutrition, you can get a lot of protein, and above all, you can build stamina to climb Everest. So first of all, you have to train, and in training, you will require all these things. And then once you come on the mountain, you will also require some calorie dense foods. You will also need to wear leather. You will also have to wear down feather jackets, and you will have to do all of these things. No one has done it without any of these things. So it's impossible to climb Everest. And in my mind, I was very clear that I am going to climb Everest as a vegan or not do it at all. And this is the journey I'm going to go on. To be very honest, Everest is a very personal pursuit. Many or most layman people would also call it a very selfish pursuit. And it is a selfish pursuit. There's no two ways about it. It is a selfish pursuit to a very good degree. And so I thought that, if I can use this pursuit to also drive my purpose, which is telling people about veganism. And the very first thought that crossed my mind is that becoming vegan has changed my life. And if everyone else becomes a vegan, then their life will also change. So it literally became a mission of my life to make everyone vegan. For the first 8 years, I was a vegan activist from every angle you can think of. Every dinner table discussion, every party in the office, every single opportunity that I got where I could bring up veganism, I made sure I brought up veganism and I made sure that I discussed veganism and that I tried converting people to become vegans. All that ended up happening was someone occasionally writing to me and say that, hey, we ate at a vegan restaurant and the food was, yummy. But real tangible change was simply not happening. And what that was also doing to me was, as an activist or as a person, I was becoming a lot more negative in the sense that why can't they see what I am seeing? And it was becoming very tough on me in the sense that I was losing a lot of friends. I was avoiding a lot of friends, a whole host of, social scenarios. And it's not like I'm forcing my views, right? There are billions and billions of victims involved who are dying every day because of the decisions that we are making. So it's not like I'm trying to force my views. They better be vegans, honestly speaking. But from an activism standpoint, what I decided to do was that I said, hey, let's just, for the lack of better word, let's just respect their choices. I'm not respecting their choices. I'll be very clear, okay? There's no respecting a choice where someone is eating an animal. I cannot respect that choice. But for the lack of better word, I, started respecting their choices in the sense that I stopped telling them that go vegan, or, that I started telling them that, hey, this is wrong or why this is wrong. And suddenly I started realizing that things changed a little bit in the beginning. And over the course of time, I realized that a lot of people were actually calling me and asking, hey, you are coming to, dinner at our place. How can we make vegan food for you? But I also started noticing that they were actually trying to change me to become vegetarian. So suddenly I stopped telling them that become vegans, and they start telling me that you should become a vegetarian and our lives will become a lot easier and we can just have socially a lot more fun. And I'm like, this is bonkers. At least I was now no longer that negative person struggling with people. So that was at least all kind of sorted until I found my Everest. And then I went and actually climbed my first 20,000 and I posted about that online that I climbed this mountain and I did that as a vegan and that I was really good at it and that, this is how I did it. And then I suddenly started realizing that a lot of people were reaching out to me and asking me, what were you eating? And how did you fuel? What was your training like? And I suddenly realized that this is a great, like entry into their lives. Because if I am constantly telling them that go vegan, they are not listening to me at all. But if they ask me the question what to eat, and then if I advise them, they are far more receptive to the advice. So until they ask the question, they are simply not receptive to advice. I'm not saying that this is going to be the case in every case, right? All forms of activism works. But I realized maybe for me, this can become my activism, is where I can, have this nice middle ground between my passion and my purpose. And my purpose is, to get as many animals off plate as possible and to have a world where the word vegan does not even exist because we are all vegans by default. So then we don't have to ever discuss and we don't need activism. We don't need any of these things. That is my, ideal world. And so that is my purpose. And so if this purpose I can achieve through my mountaineering, right? And look, I don't have any false aspirations that I'm going to change the whole world. But I do know that I can change a small part of the world. And if there are many of us, then we can change the whole world. So it is not a game where a single person can do it. We literally need to be an army of compassionate people who will, bring about this change. So I, instead of getting overwhelmed that I can't change everyone, I thought at least I can change this small subset of people. Let's start making a difference there. Let's start the journey here. And that's where my passion got a purpose. And the journey went forward.
I have heard this story before as well when I met you in a conference, and it still gives me the same goosebumps like before when because I think the most important thing that I learned from your story is it's always better to show than to tell. It was a different thing when you're telling people to go vegan and then you do something and then they're inspired by you and then they come asking you, how did you do it? So when you were actually climbing Everest and you have climbed it twice, I remember you have, but you have been there more than twice, right? So how has that been?
So, of course, after I decided that I wanted to climb Everest and I climbed that first 20,000 feet peak as like a proof of concept that things can be done as a vegan. The first proof is to always yourself, not to others. So, after that, I realized that I have to go on a serious training journey and I kind of remember these words of my expedition leader back that day to finish up that story from October of 2010. Of course, that Sherpa was shouting my name because I was a team photographer and he wanted me to take pictures of Everest. So that's why he was shouting my name. So I took all the pictures, of course, and then I went inside the dining tent again. And I like instinctively asked Tim Rippel, who was our expedition leader, Tim, I want to climb Everest and tell me what is the secret behind climbing Everest. So his answer was very vague. That answer has become the mantra of my life. Is that he said, Kuntal, to climb to the top of the world, you need a top of the world body and you need a top of the world mind. And that is the journey that I have been on. And that is actually going to be a never ending journey. It will only end when I end. And it will continue for the rest of my life. So, since that day, I have been on this pursuit of creating a top of the world body and a top of the world mind. And so, for the next 4 or 5 years, I built my physical fitness, I built my mental fitness, I built my emotional fitness, got ready, and finally signed up for my first Everest climb in 2014. And I landed up at the base camp in 2014. Unfortunately, on April 18th, there was a massive ice avalanche in a very difficult section of the climb called the Khumbu Icefall between the base camp and Camp 1, where a glacier, thousands of tons of glacial ice, broke apart from about 1,000 feet above and it fell on that section. And unfortunately, more than 8 Sherpas were crossing that section at different portions. Where the biggest blocks fell, there were about 17 Sherpa guides who got crushed to their death in like microseconds. Didn't even, get a chance to escape or anything. They were just crushed. And what happened after that was this route that we take. This route was found more than 20 years ago. And the same route has been used every single year. This specific route, right? There are multiple routes to this ice fall. And a lot of times, these routes change. But for almost 20-25 years, the route had remained stable and was going through a certain section of the ice fall. And now, suddenly, to be there in the middle of the season, the route that we have been taking for so many decades, completely crushed. There's not enough time to find a new route through the whole maze, and so it was decided that the expedition will be cancelled that year, and everyone will turn around and everyone will go home. So the expeditions were cancelled in 2014. We turned around, came home, and from my thought process, it was like, look, we stayed alive. April 18th was literally our first time we were going to go in the ice fall. There was a good chance we could have been there. Coincidentally, two bags, one of mine and one of my friend, did not arrive, which means that we did not have boots, we did not have ice axes, we did not have crampons, harnesses, or anything because all the technical gear was in that. And so we had to postpone our climb by one day, and this happened. So we lived, we didn't die. The mountain is still there. And unfortunately, 17, strong mountaineers were lost. And it was smarter to just take a step back, come back later. That's what we did. We trained for another 1 year, and then we went back in 2015. Now, in 2015, things were coming along fine. Everest is climbed in stages because Everest is at 29,000 feet. So, if I take someone from sea level and put them on top of Everest, they'll die within 5 minutes. There'll simply not be enough oxygen that their body organs will receive. They'll shut down, have a massive cardiac arrest, and they will die. So you have to acclimatize slowly and climb that mountain. So it takes like roughly about 50 to 65 days to climb Everest. And stage one is where you walk to the base camp. Stage two is where you acclimatize at various altitudes on the mountain and then retreat to the base camp again. And then stage three is once the weather window opens up, you go to the top of Everest in one shot in 5 days and come back down in 2 days. The reason I said weather window opens up because at around 9,000 meters or 10,000 meters on planet Earth, there's a wind system called the jet stream. This system blows at almost about 250 kilometers per hour to 300 kilometers per hour. Now, this system can severely impact the topmost portions of Everest. A lot of times, what happens is that this system actually goes down a little south. So, let's say if instead of 10,000 meters, it even comes down at 9,500 or 9,000 meters, it's going to drastically impact the weather on Everest. For most of the year, the system is really a lot more south. So, the summit of Everest is battered by winds like category 4 hurricanes or something like that. So you have this very small window in the month of May where the system just goes north. And then the winds, fall down to about 15 to 20 kilometers per hour, sometimes 30 kilometers per hour. And this is manageable. We can climb within, those kind of winds. And so people, usually climb during that time period. So we have to wait for that right weather window is when we can make our summit push and come back down. So that's how the three stages are. In 2015, stage one was finished. And in stage two also, which is about 25-30 days, we had finished about half the stage two. And we had come back down to the base camp. Usually when you are at the base camp, you are in the dining tent. It's your place where you sit down, where you eat food, where you kind of chat with people. It's just your relaxing, your safe place. And that day, April 25th, the day was also very cloudy. So a lot of fog had built up at Everest Base Camp, almost like about 50 feet above the base camp. So that low the fog had kind of set in. But when the fog sets in is also a great day because the temperature gets nicely regulated. So the temperature does not fall below 0 degrees and it's also kind of a little warm. So the actual feel is really warm. So I was actually in my t-shirt and my, like very single layer and I was wearing slippers that day. So it was nice and great weather and we were all chilling and sitting in our tent, like dining tents. And that's when my chair started shaking a little bit. I mean, I shouted, feels like an earthquake. But then the guy next to me said, perhaps you are having altitude sickness. And that can actually be true. That sometimes you start thinking things that are actually not happening for real because you could be altitude sick. But this wasn't the case because 5 seconds later, the whole dining tent was shaking. So we knew that this was an earthquake. So we all came out and we were standing outside our dining tents and we looked to our left, towards our front, towards our right. And there were people all outside. So it was clearly a massive earthquake and people were really worried, like about such a size of earthquake hitting. Now we had no idea back then what level of earthquake this was, but it was a 7.9 magnitude earthquake, one of the largest to hit Nepal in a century. And we were in middle of this earthquake. For a moment, it really felt like our whole glacier was like swinging from one end to the other end. Like, and I'm not exaggerating. Like, you could literally like be standing on the ground, and that's like the ground is like going like this. And in those moments, we were also joking a little bit. Like, I was telling my German mountaineer friend Josh that what if the ground opens up like those, Hollywood movies and we are all sucked in? And he's like, that only happens in movies, it doesn't happen in real life. And we were kind of just standing and just generally enjoying. There was this false sense of invincibility in us, if I have to say, right? Like at the end of the day, nature has the last word always. If anyone is tuning into this podcast, nature always is going to have the last word. You can make freaking thousand different plans. If nature doesn't want you there, you will not be there. End of story. So anyway, we were standing there thinking that we will have the last word, and that in 75 years nothing has happened to the base camp. It is the safest place on planet Earth. Little did we know what is going to happen next. The earthquake stopped, and then we hear this loud boom as if a massive bomb blast has happened somewhere in close proximity. And we thought that, okay, this is an avalanche. And we thought that an avalanche had happened on top of Everest in the higher camps. Because that's where the voice was coming from of the avalanche itself. So the problem that day was that there is a 50 feet fog that has set in. It's not like I can see any mountain and I can see if something is going to come from. We are so far away from the mountains that nothing can reach us. We are safe, right? So there's this false sense of invincibility, and we are standing there and we are like looking around everywhere, but we can only look towards the direction of Everest. We can't see what is coming from there. So we are standing there, and then something very unusual happens. There are these people standing in front of me, like 20, 30 feet away. There is the next campsite, and they are all suddenly running towards Everest, and I'm like, why would you run towards the danger? And that's when we suddenly look behind, because instantly do you think if they are running towards Everest, that means something's coming from behind. And the moment I looked behind, my heart just sank in that moment. From the left of the sky to the right of the sky, the whole sky was filled with just snow and ice. A massive avalanche less than 3 seconds away from us. And in that moment, I didn't think that I was going to die. I was actually very certain that I was going to die. So I stood there, said all my prayers, and I'm like, this is it, done. What? Where am I going to run? How am I going to save myself from this? Because nothing's going to happen. And while I'm telling you all this story, everything of this sort happens in like slow motion in microseconds. And then suddenly I have these two running, and instinctively I just join and run behind them. And so we all go run behind and go behind a tent. I always thought, why did we hide behind a tent? How is like a piece of plastic going to, freaking save us from that avalanche, right? It's not going to save us, but you're just simply not functioning at that point. You're just doing something. And I was just following those three people. So we went and we hid behind that tent, and then the avalanche just came and hit us really hard. And I was like, okay, within the next 5-10 seconds, we'll be dumped under like 3-4 feet of snow. And if you're not able to dig out of this 3-4 feet of snow, it will become concrete and we will end up, getting buried alive and die a painful, slow death. It's so. Sometimes, I feel that humans work in. Maybe it's just me, I don't know. We also, always try to look for community even in misery. Like, I'm going to die, but I have this, another 100 people who are going to die with me. So, okay, it's, a little bit of solace that, okay, I'm not dying here alone. There's all these, more people going to die with me also. Okay, great, no problem. I'm okay dying here. That's how like my mind was, like trying to just, give myself a little bit of solace. But then 10 seconds later, I look at myself and I'm like, it's only 2 inches of snow. So this is of course not the avalanche. Right? This is only the after wave or the aftershock of avalanche that is, hit us. And I was like, okay, great. Maybe I'm just going to make it out of this alive. And the next thing I realize is that I'm not able to breathe at all. And so I'm like, calm down. Maybe I'm just panicking. And I calm down, but I'm still not able to breathe. So the guy next to me, the German mountaineer Jost, he opens his jacket and he says, Kuntal, you can come inside my jacket and breathe. So I went inside his jacket and I was breathing inside his jacket. And he was breathing inside his own jacket. And there's a Japanese climber who was breathing on the left side of his jacket. And so three people breathing inside that one jacket. And this guy, the German mountaineer, has his one hand up and shooting the whole avalanche with his iPhone. Like, what had actually happened is the reason we were hearing the voice or the noise of the avalanche from Everest was because the echo was coming from Everest. The avalanche impact was so huge that there was a massive echo that came from Everest.
But it actually happened
And
behind you.
it actually happened behind us on a mountain called Pumori, the very mountain that we were camping at the base of
Right.
on my very first trip of life. The massive ridge, again, tons and tons and tons, like easily like thousands of tons of, snow and ice had actually detached due to the earthquake and had fallen about 1,000 meters below. And that impact had given rise to like a absolute shockwave that, like after a bomb blast, a shockwave would have. That's the same shockwave that had ripped the entire base camp apart. And once the avalanche had passed over us, we quickly took a high ground and we looked at the base camp. The base camp was just flattened. If a typical avalanche would come, there would be a lot of snow deposition. There was no snow deposition. This was just like a shockwave that ripped the base camp apart. So it's like every tent was flattened. Some of the tents were just thrown off. Gear was thrown off, food was thrown off, equipment was thrown off. So you could literally look at the glacier nearby and it was just littered with tons and tons of things. What we quickly did was our base camp was also completely flattened, except we had one tent which was our kitchen tent, which was standing. And kitchen tent was standing because there were five Sherpas standing inside, holding the whole kitchen tent as the shockwave was ripping it apart. So there was a big hole also in the kitchen tent because they had actually forgotten to unzip the kitchen tent entirely. So around that area, the whole kitchen tent blew apart. But they were able to keep the kitchen tent standing and wide majority of the material inside the kitchen tent standing. So we quickly started one of the stoves and we boiled some water and we filled some water bottles and we quickly rushed towards the emergency rescue tent, the Sherpas and all of us to see, if we can help in our small way. Look, we are not trained rescuers, so it's not like we're there to help them with rescue or anything. We're just there to say, okay, what help do you need? Do you need any equipment, medical equipment or anything? And if we have it, we will, give it to you. So when we went there, we realized that most people coming in were all trauma injuries. These were people who were airborne, or these were people who were gotten hit by rocks or pressure cooker. Literally everything was flying, to be very honest. So those were the kind of injuries. And then we were able to make a satellite phone call to Kathmandu as well. And we realized that this was no longer an Everest tragedy. There were 10,000 people who had died in Kathmandu and more than 5 lakh people who were already displaced from their homes. This is not a mountaineering tragedy. This was a tragedy beyond unprecedented levels which had impacted the entire Nepal, not just one area like Everest, like how it had happened in 2014. 21 people had died at the base camp, more than 100 people injured, and some really, really terrible injuries. It made no sense to climb the mountain, to be very honest. In my mind, I thought that even our Sherpa crew has lost homes and perhaps has, family members who are injured and they would want to go back and be with their families, right? It makes no sense to climb the mountain. So I, as an expedition leader, I was a civilian team leader of my team, cancelled the expedition. I told my Sherpa team, go home. We all, but first we stayed 2-3 days there in the base camp because we didn't want to stress the system below, right? Because everyone would be trying to get out. If we also, add to the, the stress on the system, it makes no sense. So we also started slowly going down and we all made our way back home. Second year in the running, Everest was cancelled. But I remember a distinct moment that night, the first night when we slept at Everest Base Camp, because we slept there 3 nights. The first night, aftershocks were still continuing to happen on the mountain. And with me, there was another guy, a fellow climber, and two of us decided we will sleep together, but we'll sleep in phases. Like I'll sleep from 12 to 2, he will sleep from 2 to 4. And then if something comes, then we'll wake other up. Right? Imagine if both of us are sleeping and an avalanche comes and we don't even have a chance to run. As I said, nature has first always has the say. But as humans, we still feel that at least we should have a chance to outrun it or, to save ourselves. So we thought, you sleep in kind of, phases. And so I remember I was, awake from 4 to 6, 7 in the morning and kind of, in that moment, my whole life flashed back in front of me. There are these moments you have. You have this, whole flashback. And I'm like, okay, if I die, I would not have regrets. I've done as much as I could. It's not that there is nothing else to do. There's tons of things to do. But I have not have regrets is, the first thing I had. But the main thing that kind of came out of that was I have been given a second life today. For all practical purposes, I thought I was dead. I had even said my prayers. So I was more than, ready to die in this moment. So that I'm alive is a bonus life that I have. And if I have any passions or dreams, I can't do them once I'm 60 years old or, tomorrow or day after tomorrow, I'll come back next year or, I will, postpone. That night, we were not even sure we'll make it to tomorrow morning. That's why we were sleeping in phases to prevent, from that happening. And to then make dreams for after 60 years old, I promise myself that if there is anything that I want to pursue, I'm going to do it now, not tomorrow, not day after, not 60 years later, not at any time in future. I am going to do them now. Of course, in this specific context, it meant that now I have to go back home and I will come back next year. The mountain is still here, I am still here, and I will come back next year. But anytime I have dreams and passions, I am going to pursue them and I'm not going to, say that I'm going to do tomorrow or day after or anything. Of course, this also requires some context. It's not like, just blanket absolute statement. But especially in my case, given the rebirth that I had or the second chance that I had, I thought I can no longer, just sit and waste my life or spend my life going through motions or in apathy. That's not an option anymore. So that's what one of the realizations I had from that trip. I came back home. I trained really hard again for another year, and I went back in 2016 again. There were not many people who were coming back for the third time. I think if I can literally count on one hand how many people came back in for the third time, 2014, 2015, and 2016. So I was back there in 2016, and I think this time around the climb went very uneventful. We finished our stage one, we finished our stage two, we were ready for our stage three. We climbed through the whole mountain and we were stationed at the last camp, which is called the Camp 4 at 26,000 feet. There were four of us sleeping in the camp. We had reached at about 3:30 in the afternoon and we had all, gone inside the camp. Small tent, barely two people can, be in that tent, and we were four of us, all, completely, stuck to each other. And then at about 7:30, Mingma Tenzi Sherpa, my Sherpa guide, and also the big boss or the Sirdar of the team came in. He opened the zipper and he came, everyone get ready. We are going to the summit of Everest. Weather looks great and we should have a good night. Let's go. And so one by one, each one of us got ready and all of us started. We made our way through, unfortunately, some traffic jams on the mountain. There were quite a few, unfortunately, that evening. And I remember at about 7 o'clock in the morning, we made it to a place called the South Summit. I think I was roughly on average stuck for about 4 or 5 hours in the traffic jam. Overtaken most of it and then reached the South Summit to only realize that there was a massive traffic jam coming down. These people are not going to let me go up because there are 35, 40 of them, and we are only like, two of us, me and my Sherpa, and then there are 13, 14 people behind us. So they are not going to allow us to pass by. We are at the start of the line. We are going to get stuck here quite a bit. And so, as all of this is happening, Mingma Tenji Sherpa, my Sherpa guy, he said that I have an idea. I am going to bump up your oxygen by about maximum. It's currently not at maximum, but I'm going to bump it up to maximum. You'll get some, extra energy and you should be able to move a lot faster because of that. So I'm like, okay, great. This sounds okay. Whatever you say. Basically, when you are on climbing a mountain and you are climbing with a kick-ass Sherpa, you blindly trust the Sherpa, right? Whatever he says, he's the expert there. I am not the expert. So we quickly started walking at a very high pace, and after about 15 or 20 minutes or so, we kind of got down to the bottom of that area where the traffic jam had started of those people coming back down. But what we had also done was we had been able to create a significant separation between myself and the 13, 14 people behind. And so when the people who were, coming down saw only two people coming up, they were like, okay, come up. So they let us come up. And once I didn't say anything to Mingma back then, but the moment we started crossing all of those people and got to the top of, the traffic jam line, I told Mingma that was an absolute masterstroke. Like what level of thinking at this altitude? Imagine where half of your brain is not working and you are not even thinking straight. He had the presence of mind to make take such a calculated risk. And we also were climbing with each other for a very long period of time. So he also had some trust in my ability that I would be able to, do this. And after that, we went towards the summit. For the next 1.5 hours, no one came to the summit because that traffic
Traffic
jam
jam.
two-way became such a nightmare that Mingma and I summited at 9:20. The next people who came to the summit were at 10:45. Imagine. That was the level of, masterstroke that, Mingma had that day. I remember once we cross the traffic jam, after that, the trail becomes really straightforward. And Mingma said that he's just going to go ahead and check on the rest of the team. I can just be on my own. Mingma trusts me, so he knows that I can, climb on my own, and I'm really good at doing all of those things. So he went ahead and he was standing waiting on the summit for me, and I was taking some of the last steps. And as climbers, you constantly debate or you constantly think of what you are going to do on the summit, what flags you are going to carry, what food you are going to eat, or what are you going to do on the summit. Maybe make a satellite phone call home, or maybe video, your whole host of things. I had really not thought what I'm going to do on the top. One thing I had on in my mind was to make a satellite phone call to my dad. But the main thing I decided was that I will not cry on top of Everest, like whatever happens. And that is literally the very first thing I ended up doing. Is the moment I saw the summit of Everest, it was the biggest dream of my life. And the moment I saw the summit, and I knew internally that I will make it to the top, and I have enough energy to make it back down safely. No questions about it. That I will make it down safely. And I just started crying and crying. And all the way I cried till I reached the topmost point. And Mingma was like, why are you crying? Like, are you going to die or something? I'm like, no, 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 chill, I'm like super happy. Like वो हिंदी movies में होता है ना खुशी के आंसू.
ठीक है सर।
So anyway, we were on the top, and I did make a phone call to my dad because I really wanted to let him know that his son had achieved the biggest dream of his life. Now by then, my dad's disease had progressed way, 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 to extremely advanced stages. So he had completely forgotten that I was his son. He had completely forgotten everything. But he would still occasionally, out of the blue, smile every now and then. Like, for example, if he played a Hindi, Muhammad Rafi song that was his favorite, he would, kind of smile. So I thought that if, I communicate to him that I am on top of Mount Everest and that I have achieved the biggest dream of my life, if that brought a smile on his face, that had become an Everest for me, to be very frank. So at the same time, you can have so many Everests in your life, and that had become my Everest, especially, for that moment that I really want to tell this to my dad. So I made a phone call, I told it to him. I don't know, even if it didn't smile, but even in his mind, if he had this thought, great, my son has reached here. For me, that was very, very important. So finish that and then spend 10 minutes just soaking in the out of the world scenery. Like, believe me, just to see that scenery, if I have to go back on top of Everest, I would, definitely go back on top of Everest. It was just out of the world beautiful. You could see all the way to Kanchenjunga, which is, the third tallest mountain in the world and in India, half in India, in Sikkim, the state of Sikkim. It was such a beautiful day. And then it was time to come back, get back down. Because honestly, a successful expedition is not getting to the top. A successful expedition is getting back down. And with all the fingers and toes intact and alive, right? If your dead body is coming down, what's the point, right? Like, you'll never be able to climb another mountain in your life. So successful expedition, that another thing that I've drilled into my mind since the day one I decided to climb mountains is that coming back down alive is mandatory, not getting to the top. The mountains will always be there, millions and millions of years, even after humanity has disappeared from this planet. Mountains are going to be there. I think within this blip of time that we exist on this planet's timeline, it would better be that that blip doesn't be minorest blip, right? And you disappear. So very clear, I want to climb mountains for the rest of my life and enjoy them. I don't want to disappear after one climb on the mountains. So that's been some guiding philosophy that I have had. So then the focus shifted. I'm like, summit ho gaya. Now the focus has to be on getting back down and no mistakes, because Everest does not forgive mistakes. You twist an ankle, you are a dead body on that mountain at 28,800 feet, 900 feet. No one's going to rescue you. End of story. If you can't walk on your own, you are a dead body there. For example, this year, there was this climber from Bengal who made it to the summit very late in the afternoon at 2 o'clock. Think of that, I made it to the summit at 9 in the morning. Most people make it to the summit at 6, 7 in the morning if there's no traffic jam. And so consequently, to make to the summit at 2 or 3 in the afternoon means that you are on a suicide mission, to be very frank. You're simply not going to have the energy to come back down. And he didn't have the energy to come back down. He sat there and he will sit there forever and ever now. This happens every single year. Many, many, many people perish on the upper slopes of Everest because they simply didn't have the mindset that your life is important than the summit of Everest. So that is what was important to me. I got back down, got back to the base camp, and yeah, finally, dream achieved, and the first summit of Everest, of course.
In these two summits of Everest, were there moments during this Everest climb when your purpose, your Everest, was tested and it became more clearer? Is there any specific experience like that?
Right. So the first summit of Everest was not as a vegan. I have never eaten non-vegan food in the last 23 years. Never required, including in some of the most difficult cases. For example, in Manaslu, after the summit, I had promised my Sherpa that I will directly go down to the base camp. But from the summit, I went to Camp 4, I went to Camp 3, and then I went to Camp 2. And at Camp 2, in my quads, I had a massive cramp and I had to make a unscheduled pit stop at Camp 2 and I had to sleep there the night. And there was no food. So I did not eat any food that night. And the next morning, I went down to the base camp without eating any food. It's okay. I'm not going to eat any non vegan food. And I knew that it's not like I'm going to die or something. And the goal from my side is to never fall into a situation where I'm going to die and I have to eat non vegan food to save myself. Okay. That's always the, planning. And that was a learning experience for me on Manaslu. Since then, I have never fallen into a situation like that. I was a non-vegan because I had worn a jacket which was unfortunately made from the feathers of slaughtered geese. So I was standing on top of Everest in 2016, but I was wearing a dead animal on my body. And this jacket is a very crucial piece of equipment that we humans need to summit Everest. Without this jacket, no one summits Everest. And unfortunately, this jacket can only be built from geese feathers. Till then, we had no technology that we could build it out of something else, out of non-animal material. Since 2012, I had been writing to all the companies across the world, gear manufacturing companies, to help me create an animal-free jacket. But unfortunately, every single time I got a no, financially not viable, technology is not available. You are literally only one person in the entire planet demanding that this specific suit be made without animal material. Lots and lots of things every year that they would say. Finally, when it came time to summit Everest, I decided to wear this jacket, summit Everest, and come back down and show to the world that this can be done as a vegan. But to be honest, I tell myself that story quite a bit. That is why I did that. I have to say I did that for personal reasons, selfish reasons. I wanted to summit Everest and to use the whole, yes, tons of people got inspired, perhaps tons of people changed. Even till date, people write to me saying that it was because of you I considered veganism. But look, I can tell world whatever story I want, but I can't tell myself a bullshit story. I think at the end of the day, we have to be accountable to ourselves, and I realize that I'm telling myself a bullshit story, and that I can't live with this, and that I have to make this right, as simple as that. And that I have to go back to Everest and I have to climb Everest without wearing an animal on my body, as simple as that. And that this is possible. If I did not take impossible for an answer the first time when someone told me that you can't do this as a vegan, then why should I take impossible for an answer right now? Why? Let's make this jacket on my own. Worst case scenario, I'll make this on my own. So I started writing to all these same companies telling them that you create animal free insulation material. Why don't you just give this animal free insulation material to me, like 5-10 kilos, and then I will create the jacket on my own? Why are you worried? Your name will not come in this picture anywhere. If I go to Everest and I die on Everest because of this jacket, then your name will not come. It is my stupidity. I died, right? You will not come into picture. So, started writing these messages. And out of the blue, there is this company called Save the Duck based in Italy. In July of 2017, they wrote me a message saying, no, we don't want to give you the insulation. We actually want to build the suit for you. I'm like, wow. And so I got in touch with their design team, especially their chief designer. I explained to them what my suit looks like, what do I really need, and everything. And about 8 months of research and development and whole host of those things. In April of 2018, I had signed up to climb Mount Lhotse. I got a message from them saying that your suit is ready. After a lot of earlier communication, they had actually gone missing in action altogether. And I thought that, shit, I have paid money to go on this other climb and I don't have a suit and I will have to wear an animal suit again and go on this climb. I mean, I was in such a dilemma because they had said that they'll build the suit and that's why I decided to go. Luckily, in April, they said that the suit is ready. Tell us where to send. So, luckily, my expedition operator was able to receive the suit and helicopter it out to me at the base camp. And the very first animal free suit of the world was ready and I had to test it out. And this time I thought that I have the suit. And so what I did was my animal suit, I actually gave it away to someone else. I said that I'm not going to have a backup. I will use this suit. I will climb the mountain. If at some point I feel that this suit is actually not apt to climb this mountain, I will turn around and I will go back down. We will learn something out of it and we will try again. But I am not going to summit a mountain now ever with animal material on my body. We have a proof of concept that this suit can be built. So now I'm going to work on improving this. Luckily, none of those things were needed because I summited Lhotse on May 15th, 2018, and I was warm and cozy on the summit of Lhotse. Everest is at 29,000 feet, Lhotse is at 28,000 feet, and they are stone throw away from each other. So they have exactly similar weather systems and temperature conditions on the top. So in that instant, I knew that it's no longer a question of, like how Everest is going to happen, right? Because that was always the question. How am I going to climb, as a vegan? Now it's only a matter of when. So I came back down and I wrote to Save the Duck and I told them that I want to climb Everest. I want to take this suit on top of Everest. And they were very happy. They sponsored my climb. And in 2019, I went back to climb Everest, this time entirely as a vegan, including all my gear, all my jackets, all my gloves. Gloves was a separate story. I constructed the gloves on my own with using a tailor in Kathmandu. The problem with mittens or the gloves that we use on Everest is that all the companies either had animal free insulation but then had a leather palm, or the company that had a synthetic insulation had feathers filled inside as insulation. So either the company was using leather or the company was using feathers. There was no company that was not using both. So, and I thought that if I tell Save the Duck that construct mittens for me, they're already constructing a suit for me. I can't, ask them to do more. So I decided that I will construct mittens on my own, and a gear outfitter and a tailor and me in Kathmandu, we got together and we designed a mitten and we actually created a mitten. And that mitten till today is available to purchase at a store in Kathmandu. So I also wanted to make sure that we built 4, 5, pairs of that mitten so that if any vegan also comes in future and ever wants to buy that mitten, they can always, have that option. They can buy that mitten and climb the mountain. So with all of these things, I went back in 19. Again, stage 1, 2, 3, all finished. Finally, climbing through the night. And I remember we reached this area called the second step. If you look at the north side of Everest, this time I was trying from the northern side of Everest, which is the Tibetan side of Everest. But Tibetan side of Everest has this feature called the second step. It's a massive rock wall of about 50, almost below the summit. It's a very difficult portion where wide majority of people struggle. The initial portion is massive boulders, and then once you cross these massive boulders on top of each other, there's a ladder that the Chinese climbers have put up. And that ladder constantly, is like moving like this on the mountain. So a lot of people struggle, and there were 3 climbers in front of us, and they took 45 minutes in that area to just cross the boulders, and then they were struggling at the bottom of that, ladder area, and there was a long traffic jam behind those climbers that some of us were stuck there for 45 minutes. And for those 45 minutes, fingers, my toes, everything was freezing because my Sherpa guide, Mingma Tenzi, had turned off my oxygen. He's like, we are waiting. We can't be losing oxygen here.
Mhm.
We had to, turn off the oxygen because they can take 45 minutes, they can take 1.5 hours. We can't, and they are not coming down. And if there was a shouting match going on, people were saying, hey, go, this, lots of nonsense was happening. And while all of this is happening, in that one moment, I thought, why the heck am I here? And let's just go home, man. I have nothing to prove to anyone. I've already shown to people that it can be done as a vegan. Let's just go home. This is, madness. If, something goes wrong and something falls apart and, anything happens to me, or the next day, the headline in newspaper will be vegan dies because of his veganism. Right? And that will be like a massive setback for the movement. Right? The last time this happened in 2016, there are like hundreds of thousands of articles, with a headline saying vegan climbers tries dying to prove about vegan diet on Everest. Everything was, spoken about vegan, vegan, vegan. Right? So I was like, always that was playing in my mind. But that's when, the question you asked, I'm like, why am I here? I am here for the animals. This expedition is purely from every single angle for the animals. There is no personal motivation here. There is no goal here. There is no personal journey here. I've already climbed Everest. That phase is finished. Why am I here? I am only for the animals. and I had to climb for the animals. Luckily, by then the issue resolved, and those guys were able to climb. And after that, I was able to climb. And at about 5:30 in the morning, and those guys luckily also allowed me to overtake them because I didn't want to walk behind them. They were too slow. They let me overtake them, overtook them, and both Mingma and I made rapid progress. And at about 5:30 in the morning, we stood on top of Everest. Truly speaking, this time I actually had a vegan flag in my hand, and I was at peace because I knew that no animal had to suffer or die for my dream to come true, for me to stand here on top of Everest. And that is where truly my dream of climbing Everest as a vegan that I had in 2010, October 2010, when I made that dream, was finally finished, and that journey kind of came to an end.
How do you stay connected to your purpose during difficult times or setbacks?
Honestly, for example, when I found my Everest, I found that focus and that drive. So maybe from a personality perspective, I am someone who's just an extreme person. Like if I find my purpose, like I will go all the way, do full justice to that purpose. I had setbacks in 2014, I had setback in 2015, right? Two expeditions all cancelled, all this money lost, there's no personal life I have, all this, everything is a mess. Through none of any of these turmoil, for not once did I ever have difficulty staying connected to my Everest, because to certain degree my Everest is my life, and it's not like I lose connection with my life, right? It's yes, when I came back from Everest, it's at that point where I actually struggled for a few months because I didn't have an Everest in life. And that's also where I really thought and reflected that, do I really always need to have this tangible Everest in my life all the time? Because then I'm extremely goal driven. Then I am, like I have this Everest and I have to chase this Everest, and it's a medium to, transform myself to become a better human being. But then the moment there's no Everest in my life, I suddenly, fall into this, zone again where I am going through motions, or, I'm just, not doing anything. So I thought, why not like, shift the goalposts? Why not, think of it slightly differently? Because like today, I don't have like a big overarching Everest in my life. Because I shifted the goalpost became that, why not you wake up every day and try to finish the day as a slightly better human being? And that becomes my Everest of my life. That kind of takes me away completely from this, goal driven obsession. Yes, goals still can have part of this overall life, but then I'm always ready if any of these goals come into picture, right? So the goal, hey, let's wake up in the morning. Can I learn something new today? Can I do something, even if small, something that is uncomfortable today? Can I inspire someone today? Like even in a very small way? Or can I just change myself, right? There are so many things that can help you transform yourself constantly. So it's no longer that, oh, I have to have this, oh, let's now climb Makalu. And, that is my dream mountain. So then I can, use that as a challenge to constantly, stay on track and stay disciplined, stay consistent, and, transform myself. I'm like, I need to get away from this, because there will be times where you will not have a goal like that in my life. Especially, for example, in 2019, as I was coming back from Everest, my daughter was born, and I wanted to be part of my daughter's life in her, earlier years, right? I wanted to be involved. I didn't want to be always away training, being away in the mountains, and she not knowing who her father is. I didn't want that. So perhaps for a while there may not be place for goals in my life. But that doesn't mean that I don't have an Everest. My Everest is now very simple. Wake up every morning and try to finish the day, even if it's just 0.000000001% better than what I was yesterday. Or even if I just maintain what was yesterday. And sometimes you can also take a couple of steps back. Sometimes taking a couple of steps back is, also going forward. So it's now every day, every moment basis, rather than, always in this, oh, 1 year later I have to, run this triathlon. So I better get into these, great habits, this great consistency. And then you are also very goal driven. So some of the spiritual transformation that can happen, or some of these other transformations that can happen, kind of just take a backseat. You're just very driven doing this physical transformation or even mental transformation, perhaps getting stronger from a mind perspective is all happening. Maybe some emotional transformation also, but there's no time to look within and think about many other things that are happening or that are surrounding us. So I feel this is where I am in a very good space. I no longer feel that pressure to have that Everest in my life. Yet I have an Everest, and yet I can, live a very fulfilled life. Or can be cooked or can be a mix of both. And it's not like, hey, I really love this vegetable, so I'm going to eat this, and I don't really like this, I'm not going to eat it. It's just a mix of, everything that is locally available and, stuff that I really enjoy eating. So the very first thing on my nutrition plate would be vegetables. The second would be fruits. So again, kind of, keeping it to about 2 to 3 servings of fruit daily. And again, no discrimination here, right? All the local fruits that are available, fruits that I enjoy eating, and I just, like really like diversity. I usually try and target eating at least 25 to 30 different plant foods through the week and
Wow.
spread through the week. So this is something I consciously try to work on. The second non-negotiable thing in my life is exercise. Again, I feel that exercise has immense benefits, not just benefits for your body. Like, sure, I can sit here and say that it will, improve your bone density, it will improve your joint health, it will improve your tendons, it will improve your ligaments, it will overall impact your longevity. Longer term, you will have lesser chances of getting a knee replacement or a hip replacement. You'll be way more mobile later on in your life. You'll be more independent later on in your life, right? So all of these things are there, but there's also significant protection against even things like cardiovascular disease, diabetes, blood pressure, all of these, disease, cancer, some of these diseases that are killing lots and lots and lots of people all across the planet. Ensuring that, I have some form of exercise that I'm doing through the week. Currently, I am pursuing strength training. So that's just going into the gym and lifting weights. I truly believe it's a great form and that everyone, if they are able to, right, because here it's also a question of ability and access and some of these things, should try and do resistance training. But honestly, it doesn't have to be always going to the gym. Whatever, your situation, you can do whatever resistance training is possible within, your context. It could also be, just doing very basic things like push-ups and squats at home. Can you do this consistently? And can you constantly improve? So if you are able to do 10 push-ups today, can you go to 12 push-ups tomorrow, right? That would be an as simple improvement. Similarly, for me, if I'm going and lifting X amount of kgs in the gym, then trying to improve from there. So it's the concept is always the same. Bring consistency into picture and then bring improvement or progress into picture. But of course, as I get closer to some of my endurance dreams, I will also include fair amount of endurance training into my program. And for people listening in, even something as simple as moving, like just perhaps, like taking a walk by the beach or taking a run by the beach. Or if you don't like that, going and climbing a mountain, like a very basic hill, right? So anything, just move, exercise, do whatever you can. In my mind, honestly, being able to exercise is actually a privilege and I never take it for granted ever. And so that another non-negotiable step or like a portion of my life. And I do have to say that there are also a lot of mental health benefits from pursuing any of these, activities, right? If you're pursuing a mountaineering or if you're pursuing like running or, just going to the gym and lifting weights. And these are documented benefits. I'm not just saying because it's cool to say today that exercise for your mental health. No, we have serious about almost 20 to 30 years of like very good data showing that clearly. So these are two things which are really big pillars of my everyday life. and then another one being sleep. Something that is often overlooked in, unfortunately, in today's, hustle culture world where, people are just, hey, I want to build this cool startup, I want to do this, and, I want to be on Netflix, I want to be on my social media. And don't get me wrong, I do all of those things. Okay, I spend time on social media, scrolling occasionally. I will use Netflix. I do all of these things. At the same time, I clearly know that my body needs a good quality 7 to 8 hours of sleep every single day. And so what I've done is to create a certain, I would say, sleep routine around this. Now I go to bed a little later. I know that at Ubuntu you guys are, you love, waking up early.
Yeah.
But I am someone, who likes sleeping in a little later in the day or in the night and then waking up a little later in the morning. Of course, this conflicts a little with my mountaineering because in mountains you always have to wake up very early in the morning. Like almost always 4 o'clock is something that I always have to wake up, even when I'm locally hiking in the mountains here. But even around that, whatever timing you are sleeping at, I think there needs to be some routine, some everyday habit you get into. That okay, if I'm falling asleep by 11:30, then I need to be in bed by 11:30. Unless it's like super emergency and that really needs to be taken care of, I think everything else is honestly is just an excuse to a certain degree. So I feel, getting to bed on time and then just having that routine where you are getting in ample of sleep. I feel this is another big pillar of my life. And then I think the last thing is, kind of trying to do some activity for my mind just to kind of keep it really sharp and kind of, a little bit focused. Could just be trying to learn something completely new. So it could be like a few years ago, I got into the world of nutrition and fitness, and I really wanted to start being able to give better information to people. So I got into a habit of starting to read papers, start reading research, and that was a very new thing for me. The last time I had read papers was in 2001, 2002, when I'd done a master's degree in the US. So almost like 25 years ago that I had read, last few papers. And so this is completely something new that I started learning and I started working on, where I started reading these, research papers and started learning a new skill. So again, this was just an example. There are many more similar examples around this. So yeah, these are some of the things that I do on a regular basis, especially when it comes to my habits. And again, I will say the most two important things are you being consistent with your habits and are you making progress? And I think both consistency and progress kind of go hand in hand, especially in this case.
For someone who's feeling lost, who's uncertain about what path they need to take, or how do they find out, how do they figure out their purpose, what would you suggest them that can help them to find their purpose?
Right. So in my specific case, I almost ran into my Everest by accident, almost always. Veganism was not something that I was seeking out. It just kind of happened, and I turned vegan, and life took a different direction. Then suddenly Everest came into picture, and life took a different direction. So my Everest came into picture, my purpose came into picture, just accidentally. Doesn't mean, everyone's going to get their Everest by accident. Also, once I figured out that these were my Everests, or I thought that these were my Everest, it's not as if they became my Everest overnight, right? They became my Everest, and I realized that this is the work I have to do for them. This is the amount of training it requires. This is the amount of journey it's going to require. Go on that journey, try it out. So it eventually ended being a very long journey. So it's not like I got my Everest and tomorrow I climbed it and done. Right? That's not how it's going to work. It's going to be a long drawn journey. There's going to be fair amount of challenges, going to be lots of failures, going to be retries at trying to get to your personal Everest, whatever it is, or on the pursuit of your purpose, whatever that is, right? So it's going to be a long drawn journey, and you will have to figure out a lot on the go as that journey kind of comes along. Now, for people who are lost, I'm sure there are some things they like or they feel that they are good at or that they can contribute to. I do think that the purpose or seeking of the purpose or finding that purpose or finding your Everest needs to start from some of those things, because those are things that you really enjoy doing, those are things you are perhaps good at, and those are things maybe where once you start the journey you may figure out that this is perhaps not something you like, right? For let's say in my case, yeah, I stood that day, I saw Everest, that burning golden sunset on Everest, and yes, like Bollywood style, I told myself, पहली नजर में प्यार हो गया, अब मैं Everest चढ़ूंगा. Okay, sure, all of that sounds very, movie-esque, but it took 9 long years after that of a journey where I nearly died. So I could have easily at some point during that journey said, you know what, this is not my Everest. I really don't even like it. I don't even enjoy it. But I truly enjoyed it. So I do think that all happened because I took the first step and I started the journey. And a lot of times what happens is I want to do this and this feels like my Everest, but you don't even start. And if you don't even start, the answer is always going to be this is not your journey because you're not even tried. Right? So I do think that first of all, you have to look like, hey, these are my skill sets, these are things I really enjoy, these are things I can contribute to. And then perhaps within that, look for your Everest and then give it a shot. Give it a shot whether it really gives you the joy and the enjoyment or the peace or the clarity that you are seeking for. I will definitely say something here. This concept of following the passion, like for example, in my case, following my Everest and climbing my Everest, I do think also comes from a place of privilege because I did have, a certain, for example, my parents belong to a, middle class or an upper middle class family. And so when I was growing up, I got the best education. Consequently, I was able to get a good job and I was able to make money and I was able to save money and I was able to, and then I still had a security or a financial net, right? Like my family is, a little bit well to do. So I could, take that risk saying, hey, look, I'm going to give up on my job and I'm going to go climb my Everest. And I do want to acknowledge my privilege here, right? Like without that privilege, I would not have been able to, perhaps, I don't know. I'm not going to say I would not have been able to go on this journey, but at least it definitely made risk taking a lot easier. If if something didn't work out or if things fell apart 10 years down the line, yeah, okay, I will go figure out a different career and maybe I will take that path on. Maybe if 1 or 2 years I don't earn any money, it's okay, my family will take care of it. I have been earning money for so long, they will then take care of it. And so all of those thoughts, all of those safety nets I had before I went on this journey. So I do want, I'm not discouraging anyone, to find their Everest or to find their passion, to find their goal. I'm not doing any of those things. Just sharing my side of story and I'm just sharing my side of things. This was my journey. This is what happened to me. This is what I do. And I acknowledge my privilege. And that's what it is. But to people who are clueless, just my thoughts are that give it a shot, right? As I said, you know what your skills are, you know what you love. It may not necessarily match with what you are doing to make money or pay your bills, but I'm pretty sure you can start off really small and give it a shot. Try it out whether you like it, whether this is something you really want to do long term. And once you go on the journey, many, many avenues will open up and there'll be many, many paths that you can take. But if you are going to say no and give up, then there are no paths that are going to open up. There are no other avenues, right? It's just the journey that you are going on right now. You will continue going on that. So that's what I will say when it comes, for one piece of advice that you asked for.
Thank you so much, Kuntal. This has been a really amazing podcast. I've got so much to learn from you. Every time I listen to you, I get some new stories, some new anecdotes, and it's always, always a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much for coming to Purpose Driven Superhumans and wish you all the very best ahead.
Thank you so much. Really, really happy to have, had this conversation and wishing you folks a lot of luck with what you guys are doing at Ubuntu and find your why. I guess that's what you find your purpose.
Yeah, find my way.
That's something, that has been my motto for almost since the day I found my Everest. That's literally what I've been, telling people for the last so many years. So happy to have been here.